The presentation that follows was given by David Zacharias, President of the Board of El Mirador, on April 12, 2024, to those owners who chose to attend the town hall. The purpose of the presentation is to explain the condition of El Mirador's infrastructure and El Mirador's cash needs. When the current board was installed in October 2022, it was done on the basis that owners wanted to make El Mirador a beautiful place, arguably the best building in Coronado Shores. After spending many hours developing a remodel plan, the board decided that there are too many operational and financial infrastructure issues that had to be addressed prior to moving forward with the remodel. The board had at its command very talented people who worked long hours to put this plan together. It wasn't just a mathematical model suggesting that if revenue and expenses grew at 5% or 7% or 9%, here are the results. That operational analysis is not analysis. It is a sensitivity analysis built on assumptions that have no relationship to reality. The conclusions are that we must invest $1.8 million in fire warning and prevention equipment, cooling systems, a leaking roof, water leak detection systems, plus other, the cost of which is impossible to determine at this time, such as sewer lines and storm drains. Some of these items can cause the building to be shut down if we do not fix them. But the issue at El Mirador goes further. The reserves at December 31st, 2023 are a paltry 12%. They should be at 50 to 60%, a target your board has set to achieve in 10 years. El Mirador had not made the required reserve payments in 2022, 2023, and will not in 2024. To make up for this deficiency, El Mirador needs $700,000, and that does not get us fully onto the road of financial viability. The fact is that the past budgeted contributions were less than what they should have been, but the plan presented here, we should be able to get our 50 to 60% target within 10 years. In theory, reserves should not be used to support operations. They should be used to the targeted capital expenditures when needed. A few things have been occurring at El Mirador for a long time. Not investing sufficient money into the reserves, using reserve money to support the operational expenses and emergency costs, and not paying our bills. These practices must stop. This is the reason $500,000 of operational funds are needed. The plan presented is the board's plan to attack these deficiencies, but no guarantees are forthcoming that the proposed program will fix everything, simply because we do not know the cost of all that needs to be done. Sewer lines and storm drains, unknown emergencies are examples. Please take the time to listen, and then you will understand the reason it is so important that you vote for the $3 million assessment. Thank you.
Thank you. We have people who are attending by remote, and we had a town hall session on Tuesday as well. Were you there on Tuesday? Oh, you're right. Okay, thank you for showing up today. And a couple of rules that we have installed for this presentation is that we will talk and at the end of the talk, entertain your questions, receive your comments, etc. So you know what we're talking about, so that we don't have to explain out of order of our presentation type of thing. And so before we start, how many of you have been up on the roof? No one. Okay. Got a lot of equipment up there. Have any of you been in the diesel with fire engines on? Probably not. Okay. They are located in the lower lobby, the lower garage level. Okay. And so I can tell you that the people that have done all the inspections have been through this building inside out. So they've been up on the roof, they've been down into these rooms, they've been in the pipes, they've been in the electricals in the rooms, etc. So that they have an understanding of what's going on. So today's program, what we're going to talk about is the El Mirador condition. Second thing is the equipment replacement, end of useful life, and recommendations. Talk about the reserve study, very important issue here today. The operating cash needs of El Mirador on a day-to-day basis, and then wind up with special assessment. Because the final analysis, without money, we can't do anything. And you control all the money. My conclusion, based on all the efforts that we have gone through, and we'll talk about what those efforts have been. The mechanicals and piping are in poor condition. The monetary reserves are inadequate, and the operational cash is insufficient. All comes down to we need money. Fact is, our estimate is that we need approximately $3 million. And we'll tell you how this is to be paid through the assessments depending on the size of your particular condo unit. I break this down first class conditions and in a good state of repair because that is a quote right out of our CCNRs. Your board has an obligation to keep this building in first class condition and a good state of repair. And that's an obligation that our board takes very seriously. And that's why we spent the last year putting this whole study together. It's a very important, well thought out, and it's going to take some effort on your part, because without money, we can't do what needs to be done in the program. One of the things that we did was to change our staff. Jason, there we go. Oh, very much here. There we go. Yeah, new maintenance management. We used to have an individual, Francisco, and we let him go because we wanted to upgrade the quality of the maintenance that we had. And we hired Protec. Protec is a management, maintenance company. They have offices all over California, Nevada, and out of the states, I think Washington, I'm not sure. And Jason here is our key guy. He is the one that represents Protec in maintaining our building. And he's going to talk as we go through various equipment because he's got much better knowledge than I do. And he's assisted by Robert over here, who's in the corner, and Robert Wright. And anyhow, those two guys have been living in our building. New reserves. Reservists are very important because what they do is come in and evaluate our equipment as well, listening to people such as Jason and Robert as well. But they have a data bank of so many different buildings and different types of equipment, so they can look at a piece of equipment. When was it manufactured? What's the estimated life of that equipment? What's the condition of that equipment? And then determine basically of the total lifespan, where are you in that lifespan, so know what the remaining life is of that equipment, at least estimated to be. And so we hired Matthew Swain of the Association Reserves. And Matthew, I looked this up this morning, has a bachelor's degree in physics. Okay, he specializes in mathematics and fluid motion, statistics. Okay, one of the smartest guys I've met. That's a JC, of course. And then we hired a new manager, Michael Sabella, and Michael's right over here. Michael, stand up. Michael's been on board for about, what, 5 weeks now, 6 weeks? I'm in there. Yeah, and he comes from Seabreeze, which is one of the largest property management companies in California, but they have operations all over the country. And one of his jobs was to manage the Hard Rock Hotel in downtown San Diego at 412 units, a little bit bigger than our 148 unit. So he's got a lot of experience in managing a building such as ours.
I want to clarify, that's also the HOA condo hotel, the Hard Rock. So it was HOA related as well as this is. And I also managed the largest HOA high rise in San Diego, which was Aqua Vista, in addition to about 6 other high rises in town. So the hotel, Hard Rock Hotel, I wasn't really renting rooms, which doesn't relate to this, but I was managing the HOA side of it, which relates all everything we're doing here. So go ahead.
The reason I'm telling you this is because we're not dealing with amateurs here. We're dealing with a professional staff, with Jason, Robert, Michael, Matthew. I personally have an MBA from the Wharton School of Finance, which back when I attended in 1966, was the school of finance in the United States. And I went on to audit at Price Waterhouse, and then I went on to the accredited analysis division at Chase Manhattan Bank, where I rose to the supervisor of the training staff, where I taught Harvard MBAs how to make loans, how to analyze credits, understanding financial statements. So finance is my background. I've run 2 banks, started one myself, and then for the last 30 years, I did a lot of expert witness work in convoluted and very complex financial structuring transactions, some of which have been on the front page of the Wall Street Journal. So that's my background. I have a finance background, operations background, mechanical and engineering background. We put a team together of people who've got the expertise. These are all of our recommendations. So, as I said, we went to outside consultants, getting Matthew and Jason and others, and so we asked these individuals to prepare for us a program. What should we be doing? Where's our concern? So we got the reserve study from Matthew, and we put that into a database, Excel database. So we had a tracking mechanism of where were we and looking at all this equipment. We loaded the information into our own database, if you will, so we could play with it. And the fact is, the reserve study is such that I was looking at it this morning. In fact, you go in, change some assumptions, and see what the results are. It's all mathematical, conducted. As a matter of fact, this is the reserve study right here that we received in January from Association of Reserve. And you can be my guest. I'd be glad to explain anything in this thing, but it's got more numbers in it than you can shake a stick at. But it's all based on a lot of knowledge from people who have that knowledge relative to running a building like El Mirador. So what we did then is load this into our own database and started analyzing this data. And I'll show you that in a moment. And then we reviewed it with the board of directors, and they approved what we're suggesting here. 5-zip, by the way, and now we're holding our town hall meetings. We had a committee during this whole process, which consisted of me, Rudy Sanchez, who is the owner in our building, Jason, who's sitting right here, Bob Mahoney, who is also an owner in our building, and manufacturers. We have people who are concerned, let's say, about fire equipment. This is what they did, and we have them come in and say, tell us the condition of that fire engine, tell us the condition of that air conditioning system, etc. And what do you think? How long do we have left that this thing will run before it starts breaking down? And then, of course, the consultants that I mentioned. So we went through and came up with an inventory of what the issues were. We determined what the end of the equipment life of this equipment is, and then the approximate cost to repair or replace. I put the word range up there because one of the issues that we go through is that you'll see where the cost estimate goes from this number to that number. And there's a reason for that, because we don't know exactly the answer at this point in time. Give you an example. The roof. The roof, we had a $10,000 quote, fix the roof, and we had one for 41,000. Then we had one for 300,000, and then we had one for 700,000. 10,000 to 700,000 was the range. Which one did we pick, and why? Well, so we had to study all that, and you start reading warranties and precisely what they'll do. It's not an interesting job, but before we let a contract, we better know what it is that we're doing. In any case, as it relates to I missed one here. Okay, here we go. Get it back. So when we have ranges, as I said on Tuesday, that if we spend the lower dollar amounts rather than the higher dollar amount, that difference goes into the reserves because we need the reserves. So the money is just not going to be set aside and spent foolishly. It's going to go into the reserves. So as I mentioned, we talked to the reservists and the vendors about the end of the equipment life, so we know how much longer we have. As a matter of fact, in this study, if you want to take a look at it, every piece of equipment that we have is outlined here in terms of what the estimated useful life is and how far into that life we are, and therefore how much is remaining. And if you see 0 for remaining life, you know it's at the end of its useful life. Now, those can be adjusted because of what the people, when they come out to look at the machines, say, they say, well, you've probably got another couple of years on this machine. Yeah, wasn't always the case, which it were, because we would be here today. They also, then we developed what we call a decision grid. Let me show you that decision grid. I'm sorry for all the words, but we had pages of this stuff. And basically what we had is, in the first column here is the individual piece of equipment that we're talking about, or the system. And up here you can see UL, that's useful life. And so if you just look at the fire systems, 50 years useful life. Our building was built in 1977. Well, lo and behold, we're close to the end of that useful life. And we did that for every piece of equipment. Okay? And then we have remaining useful life. Well, that's 0, 0. This was 1 more year. That was a question mark, etc. So you can see that we have a lot of zeros up there. Then the question is, well, how do we rank these? Which ones do we tackle first? And we went in and said, well, we got a couple of priorities. See, 2,000 priorities. The first one is for importance. How important is it that we take care of this? And it's very important as an A. Because it's kind of important, but we can put it off for a while, maybe, no danger or anything. Ready to be. See if we can push it off for a while and not worry too much about it. That was a C in terms of priority. Of course, I'm only showing you DAs, and I think there's a couple of B's in there too, yeah. And then we have another priority, 1, 2, 3, and that's the timing. The question that we were asking ourselves is, if we don't do this now, this important thing now, will the building be shut down? And this is not a sense of humor. This is a serious business. Because we were threatened by the fire department last July 29th, in fact, that the building could be shut down. And if it's shut down, that means 148 units are closed. That means everybody's got to vacate. And the reason for it was because how we were taking care of a leak that we had in unit 810, which affected 710, 610, 510, 410, 310, 210, 110, upper lobby, lower lobby, and the fire escape. And what the fire department didn't like was how we were removing the drywall and the fire escape because of the containment of asbestos. And so Jason, in his infinite wisdom, worked it out with the fire department. Like, hey, how about if we do it this way rather than the way which the experts were doing it? And they ultimately fought off on it, so we didn't have to close the building. Let me tell you, as the president sitting in that room, when that deputy fire chief said, we're going to have to close you down if you don't change that was a shot right through my forehead. I don't know how I could face all of you with that type of news. You probably would have to. Anyhow, this is the grid that we use to ascertain which ones we go after. As we were going through this, we said there are some things that we don't have to do, the time or the priority. And one of the things that we just said, we can't do a remodel at this point in time. How can you remodel the hallways if you're going to have to tear up the hallways, put pipes in? So you just have to defer the remodel. But we spent a lot of time when this new board got into office. The whole purpose of this board was to go through a remodel. And so, this could be a lot of fun. It was fun until we wake up one day and get a phone call, emergency, emergency, and we started thinking about this while we were halfway through the remodel planning process. We had a couple of town halls on, depending on if you came to them or not, but we had 2, maybe 3 town halls on the point. We're at a point now with the remodel where we've got a package that we can deliver to a general contractor and say bid on it. And we anticipate doing that in the not too distant future, but we had to put this one on hold. And once we satisfy our immediate needs here, and we can see the end in sight of fixing this building up to the level that we want it to be, then we're gonna take it off the shelf, bid it out, bring it back to you all, and say, here's what the deal is. Do you like it? Do you approve the assessment? That type of thing. So you have another shot at it. Exterior painting. There we go. Exterior painting. I will tell you that based on the reserve study, we're supposed to repaint the exterior of our building this year. Well, I looked at the building and said, well, it's $550,000, and we're going to be asking for money. But do we need the building repainted this year? My conclusion was no. And I put down 4 years, show it in my numbers here. 4 years from now, we will repaint it. Now, if the building starts looking tacky before that, believe me, that's going to move off its priority. But right now, that's not an issue of safety concern. The physical appearance concern. But we went through a number of these, and just these alone that we're deferring out of the $7.5 million. I didn't add up all the smaller stuff, but it would probably be close to probably excess of $8 million that we're deferring. What that means is that sooner or later they have to be done. We're just not going to do it now. Okay, let's talk about the significant issues that we have here today. Fire engine and pumps, cooling systems, fire alarm systems, roof leaks, water leaks, sewer and gray water lines, storm drain, general maintenance. Those are the big issues. Don't want to get too much into the weeds of these, but we're going to go through just so you're aware of what's going on within our building. Fire engines and pumps. As I said, the fire engines and pumps are located on the lower garage level, where you just drive into the garage. There's a room right after the 8th parking spot. There's a room there that has 2 engines and 2 pumps. Unfortunately, they haven't been tested to the degree that the law tells us to. They were not certified tested for about a year before Protect was hired. The law, by the way, is that they have to be tested 30 minutes every week to make certain they work. And they were not being tested. And so when we had a company come in, hey, tell us about these engines. Are they good or not? Well, one engine does not work and one pump does not work. So we debated, well, why not? Well, these engines were purchased in 1977. They're the original engines. Okay? And they're huge, 135 horsepower engines. We have 2 of them. And we can't get parts anymore for them. So the question was, well, what should we do? Should we go out and buy 2 new engines, or should we maybe cannibalize one engine for parts from the other engine and therefore only buy 1 new engine? Well, that's half fixing it. We decided let's get 2 new engines and not take the risk that 1 engine will go down. As I said, no parts available. We have 1 fuel tank. Supposed to have 2 fuel tanks. 1 fuel tank for each engine, because fuel oil can get clogged. You probably wouldn't want to clog fuel line at the moment when you need the fuel, puddle water up into your condo for your sprinklers. And that's what these engines do. So you got to have everything working. Some of the valves out there where the tank of water, we have a huge tank on the where the parking lot is the city, just to the south of us. Well, up against our building is this huge water tank. It is large, filled with water, but all the valves didn't work. And so we've already replaced some of the valves. Okay. The fumes out of the room with the 2 diesel engines, you've all smelled the smoke from diesel engines. And well, it goes outside, but rather than being piped up into the atmosphere above everything, the pipe goes down towards the ground, about 2 feet off the ground. Just above that a little bit happens to be the vent for the room. So can you imagine? Fumes come out, the vent is there, where the fumes can go right back in. That's dangerous. And it was originally planned to have a pipe that went all the way up so that it would escape into the atmosphere. Fire department came in and did their evaluation of our condominium during the summertime. And they cited us for 15 violations, 6 of which were repeats. As a former auditor, I can tell you, you never want a repeat, because that tells the auditor that you don't care what they're saying to you. I think we should care what the fire department thinks of us, because they can shut the building down. So the important thing is that the engines were not tested. And thank God, because I don't know what the result would have been at that point in time. By the way, you just don't go out and buy a couple 135 horsepower diesel engines and install. I mean, there's a lead time, there's plumbing that's got to go in, there's a generator, there's batteries, there's drainage, there's all kinds of issues associated with this. And if you ever have an opportunity, if you go take a look, it doesn't take you very long to come to conclusion. So the estimated cost, we have a bid right now for $47,000 to literally remove both engines, the pumps, and build them properly. Jason, you want to talk a little bit?
Yeah. Thank you so much, everyone, for being here this morning. David kind of set the table for what I do as a profession. And one of the things, all right, I think that's a little bit better. So one of the things that we were asked to do is come in and provide recommendations based upon our observations, as David pointed out. And so some of the conditions here at the building were what I would call concerning. I don't want to doomsday you this morning and talk about things. I think the photos and the way that David captured all the information is memorialized in a way that everyone can get behind. But, you know, I think I just want to touch on some things that have happened here locally and nationally. I think most people know about what happened at Champlain Towers, where tragically many people lost their lives through a series of events. I will share with you that the board, residents knew about the issues, and for years had tried to go in a direction where they could fix some of these things, and they were late. And locally, we had a building right by the ballpark, it's called Diamond Terrace, where a pump failed on the roof, the water made its way down the elevator shaft and flooded most of the building. And so residents basically were in hotels for months. They weren't able to come back, and it was all vendors, all hands on deck, you know, to put that back together. That was not a fire system. That wasn't some of the systems that we're talking about. So when I say that I'm really concerned, we actually had a third party come in because these pumps are very expensive. So we needed someone to tell us, yes, in fact, this is an issue, and they failed the pump test. So that to me is very, very concerning. And this is one of the reasons why David, as well as many of the people involved, have spent so much time in being able to put this presentation together for you. So in this instance, as Dave pointed out, the fire pump parts are no longer available. It's an urgent need. I would put this at the very top because, of course, if we have a fire, we need to be able to fight that fire in high rise. So that's all I had for this one.
Cooling systems. We have basically 2 air conditioning systems in our building, off from the roof down. One is to air conditioning the common areas, the hallways, the lobbies, that type of thing. And then the other system is pumps water into your units. And if you hit your thermostat and you want warmer water, your system heats up the water, and that creates then the warm air that you want to heat your condo. Cold water is fed. I don't think these machines can make the water colder, but it can make it warm. And that's how the system works, if you will. And we can say that these things are at the end of their useful life. The issue is what can we do to prolong them? We've done some maintenance on the condo unit area because we're concerned about getting through the summer. And if we had a problem, we would have a problem with the common area and not the individual units, because you all live in those individual units. That's where you want to be comfortable if you have to have a choice. The units that we're looking at, they have not been maintained properly, and Jason talked about that. They've been rusting out. They've been leaking water and coolant out of the roof of the building, which does not do any good to the silicone cover that we have. They're past their useful life and there's some internal mechanical problems. Here, the cost is between $512,000 and $766,000. The reason that spread is there is because we had a debate going on as it relates to the new system, new technology called Nexus. And one company indicated that we needed 3 systems to be put together. The other company said, no, you need 4 systems. I said, well, which way do we go here? And when I put these slides together, we didn't have the answer to the question. I believe at this stage of the game, we're leaning towards the lower dollar amount, that 3 systems put together will be sufficient. But I lived over in Phoenix, and let me tell you, when it comes to air conditioning, I don't have too much air conditioning, but not enough. And I was very concerned about this. Jason?
Okay, so as I mentioned before, pictures speak 1,000 words, and you can see here at the bottom photo, that is what used to be metal. There is no refurbishing that. The integrity is just not there. The photo on the right is of our cooling tower. It has a stainless steel base with a galvanized upper. The board, board of directors before we came aboard, had elected to do a refurbishment, approximately 70,000 plus, and were able to buy us some more time. During the refurbishment, as it overlapped when we came, they punctured a hole in the top of the cooling tower, which told us that the integrity, the thickness of the metal was no longer there. And I'm talking about a light sanding. So what can you expect if another hole was to pop out? Well, the cooling tower, as you can imagine, has a lot of exposure to water. Given that the roof and the drains are in such poor condition, it would be likely that the building would be flooded out. So again, one aspect, as David pointed out, is the air conditioning and heating aspect, but also too, that exposure to water is very, very concerning. And again, I don't know what your expectations are of how equipment should look, but this would be one of the buildings that I've seen that is deteriorated to a point where I don't know that I can compare it to another building that we've had. So it's urgent that we get these things replaced as soon as possible.
Fire panel. Fire panel is a mechanism, there's a picture of it in a second, that tells you if you have a fire, where it is, the alarms go off. Well, ours doesn't work. We have been advised by an individual that came in, we had to evaluate it, they said, you guys should be on fire watch. This hit the top priority, obviously. And a lot of it has to do with wiring. ADT is our vendor in this particular situation. ADT has been giving us a very difficult time trying to arrange buttons to have come out to check the system out. There is I couldn't get this term yet, Tuesday, the card, the computer card.
Yeah, they because our system is so old, they reference it as a disk, and that basically contains all the information that's necessary to replace this.
And that's the difficulty in updating the panel part. We need that so that we can evaluate and also give it to other parties to say, hey, what do we do here? Right now, we have an estimate of $175,000. That estimate comes from not only Jason, but also our reserves. But we don't have a bid on this yet because we don't have access to this card. And we need that in order to be able to give it to third parties to evaluate the right thing. This is the fire panel itself.
Yeah, so something that I wanted to point out that I think absolutely lines up with this. So as David pointed out, we should really be in fire watch if our reporting systems aren't functioning correctly. We've reached out to the vendor that we have repeatedly, and so they have not been able to clear out the faults, probably because of the age of our fire panel. Something else that I kind of wanted to piggyback on is in regards to, well, if we have an event here at the building, what can we expect besides vacating residents and having them being displaced for months on end? Well, currently, as a building, and David will touch on this a little bit more, and this is not just with our building, but nationally, insurance companies are raising their rates exponentially and not insuring buildings for their lack of maintenance. Lenders are actually no longer lending to certain communities because of the amount of work needed in the community. David can speak to this because he was in the business. We're just we're too risky for them. So I wanted to point out this transcends really the fire and some of the safety aspects, and there's a lot of things at play, which is just another reason why we want to ensure that we're executing a lot of these things.
The roof, next thing, we have 18,300 square feet of roof, a flat roof, and it leaks. And that may not bother you if you're in, let's say, suite or condo 210. But the people in the penthouse, it bothers them because we've had leaks coming down into their units. What we have done was invite, I think we've had 3, maybe 4 vendors come out, say, take a look at our roof, tell us what you think needs to be done. And so they came out, and as I mentioned before, we had bids from $10,000 all the way up to $700,000. And what the main problem here is it's an older roof, but silicone upon silicone is peeling. We basically have 4 roofs up there. One is the hard concrete that you have in your ceiling in your condo. That's very hard concrete. That's very strong and stressed with cable, if you will, and gives it stability to the building. On top of that, you have another layer of concrete that is a little bit softer, so that they put screws in it to tie the equipment down. It gets windy up there, things can blow around, and then you put silicone on it. We've had, I believe, there's 2 levels of silicone. The current level of silicone is peeling off, and so the issue is can you put silicone on silicone that's peeling off? The answer is no, because it's only as good as the base. So you got to start stripping some of that silicone off. The question is to what degree do you strip it all off and put basically a new roof on? That's the issue between 10,000 and 600, 700,000, now 640. We negotiated them down. But the ranges that we're looking at, because we have bids at 41,000, and that company that gave us that bid is doing. We left the contractor already to scan to determine where the location of moisture is in the roof, so that if you're going to go in and just patch it, we want to make certain it's being patched where there's moisture, because that is probably where it leaked. Unfortunately, with water, that's not necessarily the case, but that's the assumption, and that's why sometimes patching doesn't always work, because you don't get it where it leaks, only where the water went. And so we're doing this again. And so the question is, do we buy a new coating for the $119,000? And then we get into the issue of how long does each last. 41,000, we have a warranty for 2 years. That sounds to me like $20,000 a year. Is there a cheaper way? This one, $120,000, is for 20 years. That's $6,000 a year. But it costs you $120,000 a day to get there. So what decision do we make? How good is the warranty, by the way? So we've had this $119,000 contract is with our lawyer's office. Is one of the things you do in the HOA is to make certain before you let a contract, have your outside lawyer review that contract and make certain that it's worded properly and covered.
Okay, so just bear with me. So my personal vehicle is a 1998 Ford Ranger, and it has been very good. I am not going to invest too much money. We've all had a Honda or Toyota or whatever car you had that lasted forever. but there reaches the point where you just can't keep reinvesting money. We really got our money's worth on our roof. And the roof is essentially telling us, the building is telling us, hey, I need you to pay attention to me. You know, we have buildings throughout that people tend to go towards the cheapest vendor because it's palatable for them. They don't have enough money. And, you know, when people ask me my opinion, which again, doesn't really matter because I don't live here, I don't pay the bills, but you wouldn't choose the cheapest person to perform brain surgery. We are very much involved in conversations with people. David is very, very knowledgeable about contracts, and we are essentially trying to get something that makes the most sense so that we don't have to worry about the roof. But I just wanted you to be aware that, you know, for years we've added different layers to the roof, and we're past that now. So I think David summed up the rest.
Sewer, gray water, storm drains. I can't remember exactly when it was, but a couple months ago, we had 4 inches of rain in 1 hour. I don't know if you were all here or not, but it was a disaster from building after building. And I can show you a picture of one of the other condos where water was just cascading down from the upper lobby level to the lower lobby level. It was a nice waterfall was created. The problem is that the water came in so fast that it has to go someplace. We have, I think, 6 drains or 8 drains up on the roof that go through our walls all the way down and ultimately out to the storm sewers. Well, the unfortunate thing is that right behind the conference table and Michael's office, back as we were on a remote meeting at that point in time, water started coming at their feet. And so everybody, we stopped the meeting, obviously, and what we found was is that where one of these storm drains came down, there's an elbow that make the water go a little bit more parallel from the vertical, and the pressure was so great that it broke off. And I don't know if we have that 90-degree angle over here or not, but we have some pipes over here that we have removed from the building. Take a look on your way out. You'll get a better understanding of what it is that we're talking about. While we're going through this, we looked at the lining. 4 or 5 years ago, we relined the pipes. And it appeared that the lining is starting to disintegrate. I will tell you that with the company that relined Easy Flow, we have a 5-year warranty and a 10-year warranty. And the question then is did they really do the job that they were supposed to do? And so we started investigating it, led us basically to an individual that our outside counsel suggested, who is an expert in this area, does a lot of testing, does a lot of testifying, and we met with him past Monday, and he said to us, he said, and he looked at it all, and he's this guy, he says, you know, I got to do a more thorough study, and what I suggest we do is also put a cost study together. I don't do those. He says, I can tell you what's wrong here, and it's not good, and I need to do more investigation. And I said, well, you know, how much is it going to cost us just to do the investigation? He said, well, my fee is $10,000 to come in and look at them all and write the report. He said, but the big cost is getting the cost estimated, because the question really is what do you have to do? And he said, the only way that can be done is by an individual who's more expert than I am at it. We have the camera, send the camera down these pipes, if you will, and look at the condition of the lining. And then the consultant that we have can examine that tape, if you will, those films, and say, here's what I think is wrong. And the people who do the cost estimating can estimate what it might cost to repair it. Here's the irony of the situation. You cannot reline a relined pipe, because all you're doing is like a roof. You're putting new plastic basically on something that's not sticking very well to the existing interior of that pipe. So the only resolution to the degree it's needed is to replace the pipes. The estimated cost, I have no idea, because we don't know what to do yet. But that is hanging out there. So I said, we need to investigate expert consultant, because I wrote these slides last week, we had a consultant Monday. Camera, and then we'll sit down with Easy Flow, the company that did this. By the way, the insurance that was approved when we did this deal was $1 million per incident and $2.5 million overall. The contract itself was $1.8 million. So why you would only have $1 million coverage on $1.8 million was the question that our outside counsel asked me rhetorically. And anyhow, we don't know the cost, but we will continue to investigate because we want a quality building. And you got to start with the infrastructure before you can start, redoing hallways and the lobbies and that type of thing. You want to talk about drain lines?
Yeah, and I just wanted to delineate the difference. We are just talking about the drain line systems. This is not the potable copper water lines, which we could speak about a little bit later. We've actually taken some proactive approaches to ensure that we do not have the frequency of pinhole leaks in the building. But as you can see, the drain lines are severely impacted. You can see in the other area here, the pipes are actually cracked or splitting. And so that's the best example on the table. As you guys walk through, you'll see the condition of the pipes. And these are just the pipes that have surfaced thus far. We would imagine they will continue to pop up throughout the building. So we, of course, have no way of checking them except for camera in because we can't see through the walls. But it's I think, a fair assumption that these are just not the only areas that are concerning. It's probably throughout.
One of the things that another building, La Playa, has done is they adopted this policy about 6, 7, 8 years ago. If you go in and upgrade, modernize your condo, you open up those walls, you replace those pipes. And because your walls are open and that's it, everything's a mess anyhow when you're going through this remodel. So you might as well open up the walls and replace the pipe. And they're about 40 to 50% done of replacing all the pipes in their building, but it's taken them, several years to get there. But it's the cheapest way to do it without disturbing all the condo units. The question is we are where we are, what do we do? Where do we go from here? And that's yet to be determined. Drain lines. These are the drain lines up on the we'll go ahead and go.
Yeah, so you can see the right side is another drain line, and the drain lines or vent lines are essentially what we're talking about. They're a cast iron pipe is shown on the table. The picture on the left is a copper line. That's actually part of the heating and cooling system. And you can see from the patina, there's already a patch there to try and keep it from leaking. That has reached its useful life, and that's under pressure. So if that was to rupture, you could expect large volumes of water coming out. So again, separate from the system, would you like me to talk a little bit about what we have in place in regards to tempering and stopping some of the pinhole leaks?
Sure.
So in downtown San Diego, we worked with a company. Some of the buildings had a leak exposure of about 2 to 3 leaks per month. You just can imagine it displaces owners and then the cost associated with it. So we have been using for years this product, a blended phosphate. And what it does is it puts a very thin layer of food grade phosphate or blended phosphate to stop the pinhole leaks. This, of course, if there's an actual hole already, it doesn't coat the hole. So it's a different technology because it's a potable system, but that has essentially eliminated all of our pinhole leaks. So we're systematically going through and putting these countermeasures in place so we don't have some of these disruptive leaks and floods.
Water leaks. Have any of you had water leaks in your condo? Here's the issue with water leaks. Sometimes it's your responsibility sometimes it's the HOA's responsibility. Sometimes you don't know exactly where the source of that leak is. And so that becomes a debatable issue at the time, because it has costs associated with it, insurance proceeds associated with it. It turns out to be a mess. The point that I want to make here is that we had 63 water leaks since November 22. And as I indicated in this chart up here, most of them are from individual units. We think that about 70% of them. Well, that doesn't make me feel any better that it was your fault that I got water because my condo was below yours. Because I still have a problem. And so this is a we problem. It's not a you or they problem. It's a us problem. And what we have to make certain is that we all take care of our units so that we hopefully eliminate water leaks. I happen to be on the insurance committee for all of our buildings. And one of our meetings, January, February, I saw this particular statistic. Farmers Insurance has been our insurance carrier for the building for 17 years. They adopted a policy this past year of not renewing any policy for any high-rise in California, particularly older ones, but they just stopped doing it because the cost, the damage is just horrific when you get into some of these things. Well, total farmers payout in the 2023 period was $550,000. El Mirador collected $499,000 in that. $435,000 of that related to the problem that we had in unit 810. And what happened in 810 was the water feed line going to a bidet, broke off. And as a consequence, water was spewing. The owner of 810 was not there that night. It was a Friday night. The people below them weren't there, below them weren't there, below them weren't there, and the other people were sleeping. And the night guy, the front desk guy, about 2 o'clock in the morning, looked up by the front desk. Water was starting to drip down right there at the base of the steps to go up to the upper lobby elevator area. And so he called Raphael got other people moving. And I went up there on Saturday morning. I saw a truck out. I said, "Oh, this is not good." When you see flood busters or something like that, it's not good. And so I saw all this water in a number of the condos upstairs. And it's not fun walking into somebody's condo and see water dripping out of the ceiling and an inch of water on the floor. That causes a lot of damage. And so this is not good. And I can tell you that from an insurance perspective, we went out to about 35 different companies to find insurance. And yes, we got it. And we got a good policy. But one, our insurance premiums went up 50%. Number two, our deductibles for any damage that is claimed in a common area is no longer $25,000, it's $50,000. So if we have a claim of say $60,000 worth of damage, we got to pay the first $50,000. Last year was the first $25,000. Question always comes up, well, I don't know where we're going to have the next leak, but where's the money going to come from to pay that? Because we didn't budget that. Because I don't know how to budget that. I don't know how to budget for emergencies. Because I don't know what those emergencies are going to be. We don't have that foresight, if you will. One of the things that we did was to investigate all 148 units. And we had a company come in and look at all the ink stops and all of the hoses, you know, from where water comes out of the wall to the toilet, to your sink, that type of thing. Say which ones need to be replaced. We have an inventory now, and we're prepared today to go out for a request for proposal to a variety of plumbing companies to come in and to make certain that your hoses are okay and your ankle stops are the right kind. And I know that I have two of them that are not, and so they're going to have to be taken care of. Otherwise, I could cause damage to not only my place, but the unit below me. So it's my responsibility to do that. Just as an aside, we're figuring around how to pay for this, because this is not an HOA issue, it's a owner unit issue. The problem is that, how do we get the money from each owner? If, I don't know if any of you had to have your, fire sprinkler head replaced, okay? And you paid for that, okay? Thank you. But 35 people out of 148 counts, okay? And so we spend time going after those people and say, will you pay, will you pay, will you pay? And so that kind of issue, we're trying to think of a way to avoid it from happening as it relates to replacing the water feeds and the angle stops. Just an issue that goes on within the building. We don't know the cost yet because we haven't put the RFP out, but that's not the cost. That's why when you say estimated cost, 200,000 plus. The 200,000 is for a water detection system. We are investigating, and I just got the news yesterday because our council, we evaluated the contract that is being proposed to put a water detection system in each unit. And these are like, you know, the mouse that you have on your computer, the old system where you move the mouse around. That's what they look like, little mouse. And you put it by where the water feeds your toilet, where your washing machine is, where your sinks are, where it might be water leak, and they're tied in to the internet. And if it gets damp, at the front desk, there's a warning system that can get into action to reduce the ultimate cost of whatever that damage could be. Anyhow, our council said we got some major issues here with the contract, and that's what I do next week in my spare time. Anyhow, but that cost is $200,000. I think I may have broken my. Let's see here if I can work here. Okay, there we go. Water leaks. You want to add to what you've already said?
No, I think we summed up the leaks in general, but you can see from this, there's a lot of patina. So there's obviously leaks that have dried up over the years. And sometimes it's patina or a collection of material. Sometimes it's corrosion. On the line layer index, they're on two opposite sides. But in this instance, it looks like deposits probably from the hard water, and that's probably preventing the leak, but not indefinitely.
One of the pictures that I saw was, I live in a 2-bedroom in the O2 stack, and a previous owner sometime, this chain of ownership, did away with the bar sink and must have capped it. Well, somebody else had that same issue, but unfortunately for them, the cap that they used started leaking, and it was behind a wall. They had a cabinet in front of that, so you didn't know it, and it was just coming out constantly. Not a huge leak, but it doesn't take much water to create a problem, particularly if it runs for a long time. And by the time you figure it out, so much damage has been done. And so those are the types of things we see. The question is who's at fault? Because the owner capped it, but it's inside the wall. And so one of the things that we're looking at is responsibility for paying for all that. Because it's not fair for us to pay for somebody else's dereliction of duty, if you will, when they go cap that water feed line. Where do we go with that one? I don't know. Oh man. Okay, there we go. I want to talk about reserves. And this is one of the biggest things that we have to talk about, and I know I'm taking a lot of time here, but this is a very, very important thing. I want to stress to you what a reserve is, because when I got into the presidency, got on the board, in my background, I go to accounting and finance. Reserve accounting is a difficult concept, but I think I can explain it fairly simply. But the definition of a reserve is it presents the estimated dollar amount of the deterioration of an asset. In other words, as you use an asset, you're really consuming the value of that asset. So that as you consume it, you should be putting money aside to replace it. So that when you have to replace it, you got all the money available to buy a new one. Okay? And unlike how you might do your car, you don't put money aside, most people don't. It's those that live in their building, money aside to buy a new car, you take it out, you save, you sell some stock, whatever you do. Okay? But when you run a building like this, these things amount up to many millions of dollars. And so the key is to make certain that the people who use the asset are the people who are paying for the use of that asset. So there's a difference in timing between the use of the asset and when you have to actually go out and replace that asset. So you set up reserves. That's the purpose of reserves. And as I said, who use the assets pay for the replacement of that usage. What a properly reserved building does is to hopefully avoid special assessments. If we were properly reserved here for this building now, we wouldn't be having this meeting. Because the board would say, hey, this is what we need to do. We have the money in the reserve, let's get it done. We can't do that today because we don't have enough money in reserves to get it done.
So we have in reserve.
$1,404,000, that's the year end. $1,400,000. I'll show you in a second. So the reserve study. Every 3 years, we have to have, by law, a thorough study. And that's what Matthew gave us. Okay, this is the latest one that we have right here. And he spent a number of days here looking at our equipment, comparing our equipment to the database, and coming out with that report in terms of estimated useful life, the cost to replace, that type of thing. One of the things they do there is say, well, you got 5 years left, and here's what you should be reserving, okay, each year. Now, if the cost of replacing that is, let's say, $100,000, that may be the cost this year. But you know as well as I do, if you've been food shopping lately, the cost next year is going to be $100,000. And so they build in an inflationary factor. So that if you wait, it's going to cost you more in the future than it is today. So if you got to replace something, you're better off replacing it when you have to, and you have the reserve set aside, as opposed to going through the process that we're going through right now. Because the longer we wait, the more expensive it becomes. That is a basic fact of reserve matters. Every two, did I spell it right? I-E, I guess so. Reviewed each year for 2 years. So every, the other intervening 2 years, Matthew will do an evaluation of where are we. He'll sit down with us and talk to us in terms of what are your plans, how they changed from last year, and issue a report. So every 3 years is a thorough study. The intervening 2 years is that kind of a study where he doesn't really come in and look at all the equipment again, where he talks to us. The bottom line is that it consists of a physical and financial analysis of common area to help aid budgeting determine remaining useful life of the major equipment. So when you know that a piece of equipment is going to last so long, you should be able to budget how much you should be reserved each year. That's the concept. So you will avoid assessments. Determination of a stable budgeted reserve funding plan. That's what we're talking about here. So that we know every year how much we should be set aside and how much we're going to have left for spending when we have that capital expenditure that needs to be done. By the way, this research study issue is required by law. We have no choice in that matter. Well, where are we in this thing? Well, the Financial Accounting Standards Board is an entity that controls the county in the United States. And they say, considers reserves to be an essential part of financial reporting and for placing the basic financial statements in an appropriate operational, economic, or historic content. The comment that I hear a lot is well, our reserves are $1.4 million and somebody else's is 600,000. That's irrelevant. It's a question of what do they need based on their study. Because if they don't have to spend any money, because they're not at that point, and their plan is that when they have to spend, they'll have enough. $600,000 under those circumstances is better than $1.4 million under other circumstances. So you can't compare one building to another unless you know the total story. There's a representation letter that we have to sign as board members, by the way, and it talks about a reasonable person when you sell your place and the potential buyer asks you for the financial statement of the HOA. If they ask enough questions, they will ask for this representation statement. And that statement. And the question then is there any material misrepresentation? Can you imagine what happens if somebody lies on the basis that whatever, and it doesn't appear to be true? When I bought mine in 2014, the building, have any of you been here since before 2014? You could, okay, two, three. When I bought mine in 2014, Karen was the building manager. And I said, Karen, tell me about these hallways. Oh, well, we just had a vote. And it was, we lost the vote to remodel these hallways by one vote. But we're gonna take another vote and it'll pass because we'll push it this time. I said, okay, on that basis, I'll buy because I think the hallways are kind of dated, okay? That was 2004, I bought in December of 2014. I'm still looking for the new hallways. That's been 10 years. Here's an issue. I walked over to La Princesa. They redid theirs in around 2017, I think it was. They spent $3.5 million redoing their hallways and lobby. Our estimate to redo ours, because the remodel that we've been working on, set aside, we had a process to go 6.7 million. 6.7 versus 3.5 million 10 years ago. That's what happens when you don't have the reserves to fund this type of thing. Your costs inevitably go up. So the sooner you fix things that need to be fixed, the cheaper they are. We don't want to get into that position of paying more than what we have to. And I'll move on here. I want to give you an example how this works because the statistics are very revealing. I'm just taking an example. These are not actual numbers. These are hypothetical numbers. I'm looking at an elevator cost of $600,000. Let's say the elevator has a life of 20 years. So that's the estimated useful life, 20 years. That means that the deterioration every year is going to be $30,000. 20 into 600,000, it's $30,000 a year. So you are using up $30,000 of that elevator every single year. That means you should be putting $30,000 aside each year, because when you're done with your useful life, you want to have $600,000. Well, if we take an age of say 10 years, where are we? Well, if you're putting $30,000 each year, 10 years, you should have $300,000. That means you're 100% funded. Some people believe 100% funded is $600,000. It's not. It's where you're supposed to be at that point in time. Assume that you only have $90,000 in the bucket at that point in time. Well, 90,000 divided by 300,000 is 30%. So you're 30% covered. Well, what does that tell you? Well, now you can start comparing these ratios to where you should be. And it's very eye-opening. Reserve ratios and ratings. If you are less than 30%, you have a very high risk of getting hit with assessments, and pretty large assessments. 30 to 70, you have a fair chance. And if you're greater than 70, you're pretty strong. You may have an assessment here or there, but it won't hurt you. It's small dollar amounts. I don't know of any condominium that is 100% reserved. That's a myth. It doesn't exist. The people won't put that kind of money aside. El Mirador, the reserve study that Matthew did here, said that fully funded $11,760,000. That's how much we should have if we were 100%, but we're not 100%, and nobody is. Our reserves, as I said, was $1,404,000. To answer your question, okay? So what does that give us? Percentage that's funded, 11.9%. That's in the serious stage. That means we are going to have assessments. And until we can get that ratio up to something significantly larger, we're going to have assessments and assessments and assessments. So you're going to pay either a little bit each month, or you're going to pay a bunch of money later on. And usually it takes more time to get that bunch of money later on, so your costs increase even higher than what it would have been if you had saved the money to begin with.
Sorry, how many units are El Mirador?
148. Okay. So why are we underfunded? I didn't go back in history and look at all the numbers, but I did look at 2022. Our budget was 335,000. We in fact put 151,000 in. At that year, what we wound up doing, we were supposed to put in $27,000 a month. Just 4 payments. That's 114,000, some change. And the operating side of our business borrowed 100,000 from the reserve funds. So we took that 100,000 out. The reason you take it out, there's no other place to go for cash. If you don't have it in your operating budget, there's only one other place other than coming out for an assessment. We've been working on this for months on end, so I just can't snap the finger and say, okay, there's an assessment, everybody go write a check. It doesn't happen that fast. The longer you wait, the more expensive it gets. In 23, this past year, the budget was 389. We paid $188,000 in the system. We were $201,000 short. This year, our budget was $444,000, and get back here. There we go. $444,000. Matt tells us in the reserve study that we should be reserving $750,000 a year. Wow, that's a significant increase. So we're even funding short there. So part of the financial plan that we put together was we got to make up for this budget. This is a deficit, and that's $700,000. And that gets us back into line, if you will, to a much greater degree. But it also says, wait a second, how much is it going to be in 2025, 2026, et cetera? Okay? Well, I'll show you. The board has adopted a policy of trying to get reserve coverage of 50 to 60% in 10 years. Can't do it all at once. Nobody's got a checkbook that is that big. So what we want to do is gradually over time, and this is a chart that shows you how that the percentage increases by 2033, 34 at just a little less than 60%. So if all the assumptions were correct, which we know they never are because of the future, this is where we should be. That's our plan. I can only tell you I'm wrong in it because I can't see that far in the future. There's assumptions that we had to build in. I have not given up hope on the remodel, but the remodel has to come after we do the infrastructure because of the money issue. And also just because of physical attributes. You can't put new wallpaper in hallways and then tear it out like that. Doesn't make sense. And so the assumption that I have made is remodel, which is estimated today to cost $6.7 million, will be done in 25, 26. I hope that's true. Special assessment for remodel, we don't have $6.7 million. But based on the work that Matt and I did, he said, Dave, he said, you don't have to assess, based on my analysis, $6.7 million because of what your financial plan this year, what you will have to do based on the numbers we have today is assess $2 million and do it over a 2-year period of time. Because by the time you construct, you don't pay contractors in advance. Because sometimes you only one band after they do the work. But so budget $2 million in 25 and 26. And of course, subject to your approval, because we can't spend that money if we don't have it, and it's only you that can authorize to give us that money. Question is what will the reserve increase? I hesitate to put this slide up because people remember only the worst numbers, but I have to have full disclosure with you. The monthly reserve assessment, now this is not the monthly amount that you pay. This is only a portion of it, and it's the amount of assessment that goes into the reserves. And based on our plan, that will increase 20% from 25 to 28, and then 4% thereafter. Okay? The real question is, what will happen to your overall monthly cost? I assume people could be critical of this. I don't know if this is the right number, but operating expenses will increase 5%. Operating expenses will increase 5% every year. Well, I just went to the coffee shop for breakfast. I had 2 pancakes and 2 eggs and a cup of coffee, $26. I can remember about 2 years ago, it was like $12 or $14. And anybody who does shopping knows what happens to the inflationary rate. But I could be really low on this. But I can tell you that that was a number that Matt used in the study over a longer term. Who knows what the right number is? Even our government can't tell you what the right numbers are, given what I've heard lately. So I can't promise you 5%. It could be more than that in the future. It might be less. All we want is what we need to take care of this building. The result of combining that 20% and 4% with the 5% is an overall blended rate that your assessments should increase by 8%, 25 through 28, and 5% in the remaining 4 or 5 years. That's reasonable. Reasonable. Operating cash. We are short operating cash. I was just looking the other day. I get phone calls, I get emails. You're late on paying your bill. Our accounts payable are roughly, they were $479,000 at the end of 2022. They went down to about $380,000 at the end of 23. Now they're about, I think, $390,000, right around that number. Put it in perspective, these are money that we owe vendors or other people. We take in $200,000 a month, roughly $2.4 million a year. Okay, $37,000 of that goes into reserves, and I'm adamant on making that payment because of what we're talking about here today. I don't want to use assessments in the future, so that money is set aside. So deducting $37,000 from $200,000 gives you $160,000 a month to pay all the bills. We owe almost $400,000. How does that work? Raphael's been struggling like crazy. Struggling dollars. What bills do I pay? How can we live like that in this community? It's not right. It's from a financial planning perspective, it's a disaster. We got to fix this problem, folks. And that's why what we're talking about here is how much operating cash do we really need? The industry norm is 3 months, as you can see up there. 3 months, that would be about $600,000. El Mirador, I got to average it, it's about 15 days, maybe $100,000. The easiest thing for me to do as a financial guy is to forecast our revenue. If everybody pays their monthly assessment, that money comes in like clockwork. Not all at once, we get paid basically once every 3 weeks. So much in the first week, so much second week, so much in the third week. Just depends on how people set up their billing process. But that doesn't give us enough cash to pay all of our bills. The timing of the cash coming in is very easily determinable. But the cash out, there is no consistency. We have an emergency. Where do I go to get the cash? The only place I can go is in reserves. Well, what does that do to us? Well, that hurts our position in the future. It's going down this drain, if you will, where you can't escape until you have a large assessment. So we got to fix this problem to put this building on a good financial foundation. So we're requesting $400,000 to do that. On top of the $700,000 I mentioned before, for the reserves that we haven't paid in the last couple of years. Therefore, when you total it all up, I came up to $2,900,000. I threw $100,000 in there because just around this number here, $3 million. I dare say to you that that number is probably too low. But I can tell you that there's a lot of resistance today by your co-owners of that $3 million. Not because of the equipment, but basically because of the $700,000 and the $400,000 and the unknown usage of about $100,000. What's going to happen next week, folks? I don't know. Do I have the cash? I don't know. Tell me what's going to happen. What's the emergency? Maybe you can guess the future better than I can. But we're so wound up tight that we gotta fix this problem. So that's why we're asking for $3 million, and that's still a guesstimate on our part. Here's the assessment. If you have a 2-bedroom, we're talking $22,000 roughly, assessment. One check for $22,000. Individuals who argue that, well, you're asking for 2 million, why don't you ask for 2 million? Well, 2 million is 2/3 of 3 million. So 2/3 of 2/3 of 21,000 is roughly 14,000. $7,000 is the difference between having a cleaner balance sheet, sufficient cash to get through this process, and or not. I tell you, I've been the president now for about 17 months or so, something like that. I'm volunteering my time. I'm spending 30 hours a week anyhow. Raphael has spent, I hate to tell you how many hours that guy has spent with emergencies, doing things for other people, answering phone calls, listening to complaints. It never stops. Michael walks in and he says, holy cow, it seems like every day's a new emergency. We gotta stop this, fix it, and move forward. And that's what this plan is all about. If you don't do it now, it's gonna be more expensive later, and who gets stuck with that bill? Interestingly, I had one owner some months ago say, well, David, I don't want to spend $22,000. And I said, ma'am, you've already spent the money. You just haven't paid for it yet. That's the gospel truth. You use that elevator, it costs money to use that elevator. Somebody's got to pay for it. I don't know who else there is other than you all. So if we get this thing lined up and get the 2 million and 2 million in the next couple of years, can't make promises, but that's where we are right now. Get this thing infrastructure taken care of and getting the remodel done. It's going to be another 2 years, 3 years before it's all done. But that's the nature of financial planning. Look into the future. What are you going to do? What's it going to cost? All I can tell you is the cost will in fact be different, but I don't have more knowledge than this at this point in time. The key takeaways that I want you to have today, based on research, study, and investigation, equipment that has reached the end of the useful life needs to be replaced. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about that. And nobody's giving us arguments about that, by the way. Between replacing equipment and protect work, El Mirador will be operationally sound. Good, because I don't want those air conditioners to go out. I don't want to have a flood during July. No. The operational cash increases should allow El Mirador to stay ahead of the expenses. That's why we need the cash. Can't tell you that that's going to be sufficient because I can't tell you what the emergency is going to be. But this is where our planning is at this point in time. And if we build up the reserve, it'll reduce the potential for special assessments in the future, except for the remodel, of course. I come back to the issue of what's in the CCNR. And let me emphasize, first-class condition and good state of repair. This is so important because it affects the value of your place. If you were a well-informed buyer and you discovered that, oh yeah, I can sell my condo for $2 million. And then the buyer says, yeah, but God, I look at your reserve study and where are you going? Oh, you're going to have an assessment of $20,000. Well, your price tag isn't $2 million anymore. It's $1,920,000 because you use the asset. The buyer doesn't want to pay for your use of that asset. So you're going to pay for it one way or the other. The question is when and how much. And so that's the system that we've got to avoid as much as we possibly can. So we want to be in first class condition. If any of you rent a condo out to third parties, if you did, we have basically a realty agency here in town that has a virtual monopoly on all the rentals in the shores, and that's Coronado Shores Realty. And Missy over there got to know her fairly well over the years, and she has told me that the one building that she has trouble renting out at market prices is El Mirador, because what happens is you have a tenant gets a leak, calls Missy, and Missy calls a repairman. So she's right in the middle of all this stuff. So she understands what each of the buildings are going through. We're not rated very highly, let me put it that way. Anyhow, we want to get this building in first class condition and good state of repair, and I hope you're with us on this and talk to your friends about doing it. Thank you. Questions, comments? Let me get the microphone.
Okay, easy flow.
Close to your mouth.
It's easy flow. Are they gonna be responsible for any of this?
Well, that's what we're
That
going,
we're in?
that's what we're going to find out, with the expert. We're gonna spend the $30,000 to find out. Money that we don't currently have, unless we just take it out of reserves. So that's our position because of the warranty that they gave to us. They put the plastic inside these pipes, okay? And they were supposed to be done, so we had this long-term warranty, and they're starting to fall apart. We think that some of them were, they weren't put on with a degree of thickness that they were supposed to be put on. Some of them were too thick, which is just as bad as too thin. Maybe some of them, you gotta dry out the pipes before you scour the inside of the pipe. Maybe they weren't scoured properly, or maybe they were still wet when they put the prophylactic in, and they blow up to put the plastic on the inside of the pipe. We don't know. We gotta find all that out. But yeah, we're going after Easy Flow and say, here's the problem. What are you gonna do about it? We want the cash. Questions? Did you have a comment?
Yes.
Irene is one of our board members. She's been in so many of these meetings.
Hi, thank you so much, everybody, for coming. Thank you so much, David, for this excellent presentation. I've had the privilege of knowing you this last 17 months, and I've always been impressed with your integrity, knowledge, and professionalism. Thank you so much for all your generosity and time and efforts you give to our community. I just wanted to ask everyone, are you willing to risk the entirety of your investment trying to save less than 1% of its value? We haven't invested a penny in the last 5 or so years. The state of the building is critical. We need to take immediate action on basic safety issues that need to be fixed. If we do not pay this assessment now, we will have to pay it tomorrow regardless, and it will be way more expensive. If you want to save money, you have to vote yes. Voting no will make you pay more eventually. The board has studied deeply all these alternatives. We have the best possible team now. What is holding us from moving forward? Let's do this right, and let's do it now. Please vote yes.
Thank you, Irene. By the way, there's I got copies of a letter that I sent out with the ballot. The ballots went out on Wednesday to vote for this program. And so you should be receiving it in the mail probably early next week, given our postal system, how it works. And, but there's a letter there that explains a lot of what I put up here on the chart. So you can go home, read it. If you call me, I put my phone number there. I put my email address. I've been very open and spent a lot of time talking to owners. Okay? And I'm willing to do that because, just because that's who I am, I guess. I want to make certain that this building should be, could be, and should be, and will be all that it can be. We got to do this. So I just can't imagine anybody not voting for this because of a small dollar amount. But there is a movement out there to vote no on this project. We have some questions on the remote. How many people do we have on the remote? How many? 9. This is one of the issues I want to point out, and I appreciate you coming here. On Tuesday, we had probably 50 people. Great, but we have 148 units. So how do people get informed as it relates to what the issues are if they don't attend a meeting like this? That's why I wrote the letter. But as I'm discovering, not everybody reads what we send them. So if you don't listen to what we say, don't listen to what, or don't read what we write, how do you vote And why would you vote against something when all this talent has been put together for the betterment of the building? I can tell you that all 5 board members get paid nothing for doing this. And they put a lot of work in this, and we got people who are exceptionally great in their background that lend to doing this type of work. And on top of this now, we have Michael, we have Protec. I mean, we've had top tier talent in this program. Question on the remote?
Yeah, we have a question or a comment from Mr. Hirschfield.
Hi, David. Do you hear me?
Oh, let me, microphone there.
Do you hear me?
A ver. Can you talk?
¿Se escucha?
Yes.
Hi,
Sí.
David. I want to congratulate you for all this effort and the time you spent during these last months and the good results of this study that you made and congratulate also for the members of the board. I have a question on that. I agree completely with this whole presentation. And will you send us how does the condominium will need the apportations of these 3 million for by the time it's in one exhibition? Are you planning something for that?
The financial payments, how are they going to be?
Oh, yes, yeah, the financial payments are,
Here's how the system works. The ballot just went out Wednesday. You have 30 days from the date of that posting to vote, yea or nay. You get that in, and the payments start 30 days thereafter. There are 2 payment plans. One is if you owe 21,000, if you have a 2-bedroom, you can pay it at that one time or stretch it out over 3 months to $7,000 on each month to make it easier in your budget. Did that answer your question?
Yes, thank you, David.
you're welcome. Other questions?
Okay. Thank you all very much. Grab the letter, take a look at these pipes, because that's what we've been living with. And I want you to have a good day, but take a look at this pipe. Thank you all for coming.